I want to do something different in this video. I wanted to sort of talk about composing music outside of the production. Obviously, with sci-fi music, a lot of the compositional elements are the sounds that you use. But I did write this song originally on acoustic guitar, and then I chose to then use those chords in a kind of a synthesizer kind of environment. Now I've opened up Oliver Arnold's Stratus piano just to show you the chord progression and the different directions you can go. I'll play some variations of how it could have went if this was more of a romantic song, and then I'll show you what I actually did after. Now the chord progression is. You could play something like that. You could use some kind of arpeggio, so maybe just moving down, using various harmonies. Uh, you could change up the chord progression after a while. Let me see. So it's. Now, I obviously didn't want to use this kind of romantic piano, but it did allow me to sort of sit down and write these variations and chord progressions and kind of get a feel. Now, what I actually ended up using, let me see, I used Zeta 2 and Creamy Poly XS. It's actually a preset that came with Zeta. Check that out, Cakewalk Zeta 2. It's great software synthesizer. I fed this through a Super VHS by Baby Audio, which is a bit of, like I've said in previous videos, it's a bit of a distortion, chorus, saturation kind of thing. It makes it sound quite retro. Now, let me play these same chords through here. Now that sounds, significantly more like 80s sci-fi. It sounds a bit like something out of Blade Runner. Now I could go crazy writing something quite emotional and slow with this. I mean, it sounds beautiful. Sounds a bit like Radiohead actually, or Tom York. Now what I actually ended up doing was let me add a little metronome here. Now let's sped the rhythm up a little bit, and I'll play along now. Sorry, let me just get the track. Wrong track, 1 second. One, two, three, four. Now you notice how it's quite slow now. If I play double that speed. Now I've got a little bit of a sync issue with my metronome and my headphones, so it's hard to play in time. Let me just play it without the metronome. Now it's starting to sound a bit more like the final song. Now let me play, probably much better playing this through the MIDI as I am performing it. So I mean that is quite literally the guts of the song. Now the next sort of most distinctive part of this would probably be the drums. Let me just get the drums soloed here for you so you can hear the difference in rhythm with these heavy drums and how that sounds different from when I was playing it on the piano. See how it's almost like a different song completely, even though it's the same chords. This song is made up primarily of this same arpeggio repeating. And I mean, an arpeggio is just a series of notes played in a rhythm. A chord broken down into a series of notes. So if you're talking, let me see, like a C major. Sorry, it's a bit loud. 3 notes. Let me show you on piano. So C chord. Now as an arpeggio. Now with 80s music, these arpeggios are used a lot. So it's a technique I did want to mention in this video. You take a chord, whether it's 3 notes, a triad, 4 notes, 5 notes, and you just break it up into individual notes that play in a rhythm. I mean, arpeggiators were modules that were originally in 80 synthesizers and analog synths. They were able to sort of play the MIDI data through the synthesizer and trigger that rhythmical pattern, and you could program it to play different notes at different times. Obviously arpeggios in general are a very old technique in classical music, but with the 80s music, I mean, we use them in pretty much all of our music. And if this is something you're looking to write, 80s or sort of retro sounded music or horror, arpeggios are a really good way to go. Now the only other distinctive part of this song is this. I mean, that's another cakewalk, Zeta, Greek Heritage it's called. It's another factory preset that I just basically, what you do is browse through the presets and play something on the keys until you find the sound you're after. I mean, that sounds really heavy, and I wanted this song to have a bit of a metal feel. If you hear that with this. I mean, it just continues. It's got this, the chord progressions constantly sort of rising and dropping, and it works perfectly in a loop because it feels like it's trying to it's building tension and it's not quite resolving, and that's the kind of feel I wanted to go for, and I wanted it just to build and build until the heavy section came in at the end. This next section is just, I mean, I've layered up some of these Spitfire Studio spiccato strings, and again, these are just playing arpeggios, I think, and this just adds that classical element which we like to do in our music. Sounds a bit like Hans Zimmer. I mean, we like to mix up classical organic strings with synthesizers. It's kind of our signature sound. A lot of other composers do this too. John Sweetheart is one of my favorite composers, and he's the master of mixing analog synthesizers with live modern string instruments. It sounds both modern and retro, and like it's from the 80s. Um, Let me get some more. I've brought in some more spiccato kind of strings. So these are probably playing maybe the same chord but in a different inversion. And the reason they all sound different is I'm probably playing them through different. Yeah, so this is playing through Joshua Bell violin, and this is playing through another Joshua Bell violin, but these are panned. Look, this is panned left, that's panned right, and then this is panned in the center. These are, if you notice the MIDI data here, I mean, it's hard to read it, but if you look here, these are playing two different things, and they're panned left and right, and this is playing another different thing. So it's three different arpeggios that all layered on top sound like this big full sound. They're probably playing the same chords, just in different inversions. And if you layer this on, I mean, that's the guts of the song. I've got some bass in here. I think the bass is probably playing some kind of arpeggio too. It's like a pulse. That is arpeggiated technically. Oh, I've got the wrong track here. And I mean, let me find that bass. I'm using a Tal LX. Yeah, arpeggiator on. So again, the arpeggiator is not just used for string instruments. I use it in a lot of bass, and again, you'll hear it in 80s music a lot. It's like the da 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 da. Turn that off and it'll sound like this. Sorry, like 1 second. And then with the arpeggiator on. So it's adding movement. That's just playing that bass in a rhythm. And then if you hear how that complements the other layers. I've got some of these Blade Runner sounds. I'm guessing these are ear candy. Yeah, so it's just a little pulsar. Now this just follows along with the bass, with the main. Just adding movement. It's a very, very simple song. It plays the same progression over and over the whole way through, and it changes a little bit here and here. And I wanted just to sort of fill it out a bit. There's such thing as writing very minimalist music, but a lot of the time it sounds minimalist because you've got loads of clever sort of simple stuff going on. I mean, this is basically the underlying rhythm of the whole song. This pulsing Blade Runner sound. It's almost like a drum like rhythm. Just keeps a pace. It keeps the pace of the song. And then, I mean, other elements come in and they're just variations of this to sort of space it out and widen it out. Like a lot of the other songs on this score, it's got that kind of full band building up and a heavy section at the end, which is something I intentionally wanted to try writing. Now we've used this in another few songs and I've talked about it. This is this James Blake style. Oh no, it's not actually. These are these are strings. Sorry. These are Oliver Arnold's strings using the chamber grid. Now, I've talked about these in another video, but I'll go over it very quickly again. What you're doing here is you've got this Oliver Arnold's grid, the chamber grid, and there's Chamber Evolution, sorry, is the name of the plugin. You're feeding chords through it, and each note is assigned a different, a random way of playing the note. So you can click on the grid and change up, and you can have some dissonance, some sort of different dynamics or expression. It creates movement. I mean, you could write a full song on just this instrument. It's beautiful. I mean, I'll play the chords themselves through it. Now, I layer these up and they're all playing variations of the same chord progression. It's a little trick that I used. I've got the same chords, but I've got them played in different intervals. And that just means that they're spread out in different positions of the dynamic range. Some of them will be playing down the low end of the piano. Some of them will be playing at the high end. And then by layering them up, you've got this big sound. Sounds quite, like sci-fi, quite like an alien landing. I mean, I've used those major and minor chords. I mean, this is a very common trick that's used in sci-fi music, and I mean, I learned it from studying the music of John Williams. Now it's basically using going from a major chord to a minor of the same chord. So let me play C major. Playing a different chord. I mean, you can play around. There's a lot of different variations of that, but I mean, it's got this. I mean, it's the John Williams kind of quality. This ET. It invokes that emotion for me and for listeners. That's why it's reused. Now that's that section. So if you hear that layered up with everything else, it just adds some interest or builds tension. I mean, this isn't a good mix. I'll do a different video showing how I mix the song. This is the last section here, and again, I mistaked it a minute ago. This is the James Blake synth section, and I use it for heavy sections. It's basically almost like a siren effect, and I've created it with Zeta, and it's called a J bass. I mean, you can just, if you want to recreate this sound, go on Google and just search James Blake Zeta. You'll be able to download this preset. Someone's created it. So I've got a bass, an organ playing the chords, same chords as before, and then the sirens. Now this is actually the session that I wrote the song in. It's not mixed at all, so it's not going to sound good to your ears. But yeah, that's the guts of the song. I might have fluffed it up a little bit with some of these, maybe some strings. Yeah, standard little high note. I mean, this is in a lot of film music. You hold a single high note. It's usually the root note of the main chord. Let me see. I'll play it from the start so you can hear it. I mean, that is quite literally one note played the whole way through the song. It just adds tension. I mean, that's the guts of the song. I wanted to use the song as an example to show you what you could do with a very simple chord progression. Now, this song started off, it was supposed to be a bit of a hero theme, and I wrote it on guitar, and I got this, like I said in the last video, a bit of a cowboy hero feel, and it's absolutely nothing like I planned or what I envisioned when I started. So it's a good example of the many directions you can go with a simple chord progression, and you kind of want to either come up with a concept or a theme of the style of the song after you've written a chord progression or before you've sat down to write the song. A lot of writing music, composing music, is actually answering questions about what you're trying to achieve before you've even sat down to write it. You could, as a composer, take any chord progression and then format it or arrange it into the style of any genre, and that's kind of like your job. And so sometimes the writing itself, the actual sitting down and figuring out chords or figuring out lead melodies, that can actually be separate from the sort of thinking about what style the song's going to be in. This song was not supposed to be a band, sort of heavy band synth song, but it ended up that way after after I essentially played that arpeggio through with those chords through that synth. It suddenly doubled in speed, and then of course I had to add a heavy metal drum kit to the end, and it became a sort of heavy metal song, which is again like not what I sat down to do. I even joked about it in the original video. I tend to do that a lot, but I mean, as long as you use the sounds that fit the genre. I was asked to write a song for a sci-fi doc here, so I'd already picked a lot of these sounds before I sat down to write anything, and those sounds inherently sound like the scores that I was referencing. And so if I write any song in any style using those synths, I've already got a bit of a head start. And that's kind of the way you have to think about it when you're sort of differentiating between writing and producing.